Happy Friday, everyone. We're going to talk UConn's recruiting priorities. Do they have any holes in this current roster for the upcoming season? And who is the most NBA draft-ready player on the current 25-26 UConn Huskies roster? Welcome in. You're on the Hoops Cap.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby. Home of the champions. Let's go.
Welcome into the Hoops Cap Pod. Welcome into the Hoops Cap Pod. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. As always, we're here powered by Big East Energy Network and also our parent company, BigEnergyMediaPods.com. If you are interested in starting a podcast, let me know. Go to BigEnergyMediaPods.com and fill out the contact page. We'll set up a pitch meeting and we'll talk through it. But if you are just listening and want to get some great information, do I have a treat for you today? Coming off of Stars of Stores and the Back to the Future stuff with Ryan Boatwright and Mark D'Amelio's team. Very happy with, honestly, it wasn't the best tournament, but they won one more game than they did last year. So another step in the right direction, and really appreciate Boat and his guys allowing us to have a quick 20-minute conversation with him to reminisce and talk through some great stuff. But back to present day, we have a guest that's coming on our show here shortly, Adam Finkelstein. Adam is a NBA draft analyst and a college basketball insider for 247 Sports and CBS. We've had him on the show before for the previous network. Adam's a very well-respected guy, was just on Matt Norlander's Eye on College Basketball podcast, talking through a myriad of issues all through the college basketball landscape. But today we're going to focus on the Huskies and talk through recruiting class priorities, the NBA draft angle, which is which current player are trending as legit draft prospects now. Is it a one and done like a Braylon Mullins? Where does Alex Caravan fall into that mix? And in talking with some UConn fans, who is going to be this year's, energy guy? Who's the guy that's going to set the tone coming off the bench? Is it a guy like Dwayne Caroma from Lemoyne, the veteran transfer? Is it going to be someone like Terrace Reed, who is starting, obviously, but is he going to set the tone and be that bear that Dan Hurley has always asked him to be more of a grizzly bear versus a teddy bear? We all know that Alex is going to keep grinding through, working on his leadership from a vocal perspective, but also just being out there and having been through the wars, having won 2 national championships, really kind of battling with the guys last year. They lose Liam McNeely, but this class is really interesting. So we're going to talk Jacob Furphy, Eric Ryba, Silas Damari Jr., Malachi Smith, the whole bit. We're super excited about that, and we're going to bring in Adam right now. All right, welcome back to the Hoops Cap Pod with Adam Finkelstein. How you doing, Adam?
Good, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great, man. Really appreciate you jumping on for a few minutes here to talk a myriad of topics regarding the UConn Huskies. Let's start with the upcoming season, and I think what most fans are interested in right off the bat is this team seems a lot deeper than the last team last year. There's some roster depth. Was that intentional, or was it really just about the increase in roster with now being 15 players deep? Can you kind of break that down and kind of where UConn is right now with this depth that they have?
Well, it seems like the backcourt depth was intentional, and it seems like they were very intentional with what they wanted to do with those last few scholarship spots. In fact, I think Coach Moore even spoke about that publicly, how they weren't, really interested in finding a guy who thought he deserved to come in and play 25, 30 minutes when that wasn't necessarily the case. So I think that's why you saw them be very strategic with those final depth spots. I thought it was pretty forward thinking, to be honest. You see a few different programs who did that, just try and fill their roster with guys who can come in and play minutes if needed, but who are generally going to be good teammates, good practice guys, good energy guys, and good culture guys without having too many expectations for, minutes and all those S's, starts, shots, salary, all that. So, yeah, I think their roster construction plans this year were very deliberate from that standpoint, all the way through player retention and backcourt depth.
Are there any areas of concern in terms of holes in the roster? I was on that call with GM Tom Moore talking about, and one of the first things he said was,
Tom Moore now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's great. It's fine. It's crazy, right? Still haven't found out if he's going to be sitting with the team or if he's going to be somewhere kind of floating around now People's Bank Arena and Gamble. So I'm curious about that just from the from that angle. But as far as the depth and how they put this team together, one of the first things he said was we need to find a backup, like a third string center. They didn't address that. Is that a hole, like where they don't have as much muscle? Maybe people are concerned about maybe Eric Riva being a freshman and not having, some of that physicality that the Big East requires.
Yeah, I mean, it's a potential vulnerability, but if Riba, it's also an opportunity for Riba to step up and prove that he's playing minutes. And, this guy is a McDonald's All-American. He should be able to anchor the backup center spot. I think the concern is because he's been a little bit injury prone over the years. And so, you just want to have, if everybody's healthy, I think they should be fine. And it is an opportunity for him, but you want to build yourself in the depth so that you can overcome adversity. I think what we've seen from UConn over the years is that if they need to play 5 out and put Caravan at the 5, they can do that. Now, Caravan's clearly not a 5, but that forces other teams to have to get out and guard 5 shooters so they can play that way if needed. But I think if you were going to try and pinpoint one thing on the roster and say, hey, what's one more thing we wish we had? And to your point, I'm going to call him Coach Moore still. Coach Moore addressed it like you ideally you'd like to have 3 centers. Can Dwayne Karoma be that guy? Be a third string center? I don't. I'd be lying to you if I said I remembered seeing Dwayne Karoma play live. So we'll have to see about that.
Well, I'd be lying to you too. But one of the things I do love about Dwayne Karoma is when he played against UConn. When I was back on Locked On UConn, I went on a live reaction show and said, I would not be surprised if Dan Hurley and UConn go after Dwayne Karoma next year in the transfer portal. And
there you go.
I love his game. That's someone who, even though he was kind of like to coach Moore's press conference, if you will, talked about how he's going to fill in guys who are not the typical UConn guys. But right. I almost push back on that because I think Dwayne Karoma is kind of, if you see my jacket, this is 89-90, is kind of like almost like a throwback kind of guy. Like he's big, he's physical, he's 6'8", great teammate like you just talked about. I think he can play all kinds of positions. I think he fits in pretty damn well, and I think he could kind of scrape some minutes. What are your thoughts on him?
I haven't seen him as much, quite candidly. Lemoyne is, my general emphasis for CBS is high major guys and NBA draft, high major guys out of high school, and then NBA draft prospects. And then during the season, we'll keep up with the best in college basketball. And Lemoyne, admittedly, and I'm not, not being disrespectful here, but they weren't really on the radar. So what concerns me just on the periphery is how much muscle can they put on him this year? Because if he is your third string center and, they had him listed at 205 pounds last year, can they get him up to 220 before the start of the season so he can stand the physicality? It's a lot different to be physical at Lemoyne than it is to be physical at UConn, especially when you look at what they're doing with their schedule this season. So I think that's going to be the challenge for him, and we'll have to see if he's up to that task. But again, the hope is that if everybody stays healthy, that it doesn't come to that, and Riba can give you 15 productive minutes a night.
For sure. Another guy who has been talked about getting significantly bigger. One of your colleagues, John Ralstein, put that out on his platform about how he looks a little bit bigger. We of course made fun of it a little bit and put Alex's face on Arnold Schwarzenegger's body. He's gotten a lot bigger. What's Alex's role in this team? Obviously, I think he's set up a little bit better this year with the construction of this team than he was last year.
Yeah, I think last year there was so much external pressure on Alex to become like the alpha. He was the only returner from back-to-back national champions. It's like, okay, can And can you become the guy that we build this team around? And I think he can in part, but I don't think he's necessarily like he's not like the Jordan Hawkins where like, let's run you off 2 staggers and you're going to knock this down. And he's not the guy that we're going to ISO and just say, go to work either. So I think he's someone that is the leader because he's the elder statesman in the room. He knows what it takes, obviously, but I don't think he's coming into this season thinking he needs to get, 20 points per game in order to lead them to a national championship or get them into the first round. To the contrary, I think that level of maturation of just having gone through this, because last season was vastly different than the previous 2 in terms of the expectations around him and the role. And I go back to those 2 free throws at Villanova. I think it took him about a month to get over those. And once you put him into a role now where he's a piece and he's a key piece, but he's not the only guy. And if he doesn't have 20, they can still win. I don't think he'll average 20 next year. I don't even know that they want him to average 20. But, if he's going, if Reed's going, I mean, everybody in the starting lineup is someone who can go out and get you 20. And he's one of those guys. I expect he'll probably be the most consistent of those guys. Again, he'll be the leader from the maturity standpoint, from the experience standpoint. But I do think it's going to be easier this year because he's not going in thinking he has to step up and fill a role that is somewhat counterintuitive to his DNA as a player.
I totally agree. Let's pivot to kind of the NBA portion of this. Who's the most NBA ready prospect?
All right. So NBA ready or best NBA prospect? Because I think those may be 2 different answers. I think the best NBA ready player is Alex. Like, I think you could throw Alex in a game and he could be a connector at the NBA. That's why there was intrigue in him so early on in the process, because he can space the floor. He's a high IQ player. He's a ball mover. He can run sophisticated offensive actions. He's going to be in all the right spots defensively. So you could put him in an NBA game and be just fine. The best NBA prospect on the team, it may be Braylon. And so when you talk about his elite shooting range, underrated athleticism, underrated defense, solid positional size. So he checks all those boxes. I think Braylon's the one who's got a chance to get to the NBA, or, be the highest pick, so to speak, whether that's, after 1 year, after 2 years, we'll see what happens. But I think Alex is the one that, if you had to throw someone in a game right now, he'd have the easiest time stepping right in. But truthfully, I think there's a number of players on this team who have a chance to play in the NBA. Terrace made such impressive jumps last year. If he can make another jump this year, all of a sudden he puts himself in that mix. Solo, last year I went to the Baylor game. VJ didn't play, but Liam and VJ back in December were viewed as 2 of the best freshman prospects in the draft. So you went to that one. I ended up writing about how, way back in early December, how Solo's an NBA prospect as well. And I think, that's become that's not as hot takey now as it was in the beginning of December. And I think Silas Demery is another one who, if he can shoot the ball consistently from 3, he's got NBA caliber size. He's got NBA caliber switchability. He's going to be able to defend at that level. So I think all of those guys are going to start the season on that NBA radar, and Jalen Stewart might as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great analysis, and I appreciate you breaking that into 2 questions, because you're right. It is kind of a loaded 360 question there. All right, so it's so early, so I'm not gonna ask you who you think is gonna start or any of that stuff, because again, you know Dan better than I do, but having covered him and understanding his process,
starting lineup,
I but also, like, I just think he's also gonna lean towards the veterans, but then see how someone like Braylon reacts to all the competition that he put these guys through in the summer. Pivoting towards the 2026 class.
Yep.
Who's UConn prioritizing right now?
So, what's interesting is I did Eye on College Basketball podcast earlier this week, and with Matt Norlander, and Matt was asking me some of these questions for the top guys. And I kind of have to go back and check myself a little bit, because my job at CBS is not to report, recruiting interest and stuff. So lots of times, like, lots of times I know things that haven't been reported.
Sure.
So yeah, so I think that I don't mean to flip it on you, but I could, if you want to ask about specific guys, I'm happy to answer it. What I will say is that I think that you've seen UConn show some interest in there's clearly an archetype that they're looking for, and the skill, the physicality, the basketball IQ. I think it's pretty clear that they might need another big body in the middle. So I think they've been linked to Arafan Diane, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Iowa United. I think he's the best big in the class. There's other wings, and so I think they're pretty open to that front. But one of the questions I think that's interesting is just like, hey, how many spots are they planning on getting from the high school ranks, and how many guys are they expecting to lose? We know they're going to lose Terrace. We know they're going to lose Alex. Hopefully Silas and Solo come back from their perspective. But could Braylon leave? Do they have to entertain that possibility? Yeah, I think they do. So I think the front court is probably the emphasis right now. But multi-positional players who give them flexibility in their roster construction is probably most important, just from an archetype standpoint.
No, I think you're spot on. And so I wasn't sure, who you were going to talk about, but one of the trio that I've been hearing about the most is these folks, the Cole Cloer, Arafan Diane, like you just mentioned, and Dylan Mingo. I know that they have, I'm pretty sure I pronounced his last name horribly, which is Abdu Toure from Connecticut, who's the Connecticut Gatorade Player of the Year. I know that he's on their offer list.
I'm not sure that one has as much traction anymore. I mean,
thank you. I said that a couple weeks ago. So talk to me about that.
Well, listen, you can, and the UConn staff and Coach Hurley in particular, can't go anywhere without their every move being reported. Right. So again, I'm being careful here not to say anything that hasn't been reported, because that's not what I do. But I don't, I don't recall seeing a whole lot of reporting about, Coach Hurley or the UConn staff following. It doesn't look like, they haven't been all over him to the end there. So I think lots of times that's stuff that can evolve as they get increased evaluations. It's one thing to see, and he's a heck of a player. I mean, let me be clear about that. Heck of a player. But they've had an opportunity to evaluate all these guys now in much more depth than they did in the spring, because whether it's through the NBA camp, the June Scholastic events, 8 days on the road now with the kind of your grassroots teams. So there's a lot more depth in terms of what they can do, especially against higher level competition. So I think that's going to inform everybody's big board and everybody's priorities at this point. And so I'm not telling you they're not interested in him right now. I'm just saying that I was at Peach Jam last week, and they were 3 deep there, and he plays in the 3 SSB circuit. Could it just be a math thing? Like there are 3 or 4 guys in EYBL and only 1 or 2 on 3 SSB who they're interested in? Because Dion at the last week, he actually was in Augusta and not in California with the rest of the 3 SSB circuit. So it could certainly be that, but I'm just not sure that he's their top priority at that wing spot right now.
Yeah, and I think some of it gets romanticized because he's a Connecticut kid, and so a lot of people want him to go to UConn from like a fan base perspective.
Sure.
But whether he's actually on their radar at that level is, to your point, totally fair.
Flashes of Coach Calhoun saying, "I effed up. I took Karan Butler," or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I totally agree.
I might have gotten that one wrong, but that was the quote. I forget who the player was that he took over Ryan, but
I'd have to think about it. It'll come to me before we even if I know it, it'll pop into my head as we go along here. You said this on Adam's show. I'm just going to play this clip, and I want you to talk to me about this.
Programs from high school recruiting high school who are actually prioritizing guys in the 30s over guys in the top 10. Why is that? They're not going to come in with the same one and done expectations. They're not going to come in with the same NIL demands. They're going to be multi-year players and add that element of continuity that is so hard to find in this era. So that's another kind of counterintuitive aspect of recruiting in this class.
Talk to me about that. I think that's a really astute point. It's something that we talked about a few times on our weekly show and then just on my regular the Hoops Cap here when we talk about these recruiting channels. Like if you're going to go high school, sometimes it doesn't make sense to always go after the one and dones who are going to take away a lot of your NIL funds, but also just have a lot of expectations, and that fits Dan Hurley's profile. Talk to me about that from Dan Hurley perspective.
Yeah, the basic premise, and this isn't as relevant to UConn in particular, is I don't think you can build a national championship caliber program in the 26-27 season, meaning on this recruiting class, by focusing primarily on one and done. So like, for example, the Duke team of last year, which got to a Final Four and was arguably the favorite to win the national championship, starting 3 freshmen. I don't think you'll see that in 26-27. What is the same is that top 10 prospects, regardless of how good they are relative to previous years, are expecting a certain amount of NIL commitment and come in with expectations about being a draft pick. And you have to guard against that if you're a program. You take a top 10 kid and he ends up not being a first round pick. That is viewed as kind of a stain on the program's resume. And that will, more importantly, that'll be used against you in future recruitment. So if you're allocating top dollar and it's a risk in terms of like, hey, can I get this kid to where he thinks where the masses believe he should be drafted? Or conversely, this kid's got a ton of upside, but what is his impact right away as a freshman? Because in that pod, I go into how I really think most players are in one of those two buckets. There's some immediate impact players, and there's some really intriguing long-term prospects that aren't going to have the immediate impact that we would typically associate with a top 10 prospect. So for those reasons, I think, the risk-reward ratio for recruiting a top 10 guy, or certainly for recruiting multiple top 10 guys in this class, is a little skewed to previous years. So I think it makes more sense to focus on other markets, whether that's player retention or whether that's transfer portal or international markets, and be more strategic with the guys you're recruiting. And if you look at the way that UConn has done it, and yeah, they've had one and done guys now in 2 consecutive years, but they've also built their program through retention. And when you look at, who's going to be, when you look at this year's lineup, Solo Ball, Jaden Ross, Jalen Stewart, Alex Caravan, Terrace Reed, those guys are all coming back. And so I think that it behooves not only UConn, but a lot of programs to say like, hey, which of these guys, is there someone in the 20s, 30s, or maybe even 40s who could give me the same level of immediate production as someone in the top 10? May not cost me as much and isn't going to try and jump to the NBA after year 1. I think that's the thing about the freshmen that UConn has taken, is they've all been able to impact the game. Like Liam he was hurt, he was sick, and still UConn was a vastly better team when he was on the floor last year. Steph Castle won a national championship. Like, those guys could impact winning. From the guy who does the rankings, there are some guys in the top 10 right now who may not be able to impact winning in college basketball, and yet they've got a chance to be first-round draft picks. That's just the way it goes. Carter Bryant, 6 points, 4 rebounds, first-round pick. That happens. So, like, that's why I think programs at the highest level should think about, hey, is there someone in the 20s, 30s, and 40s who can come in and play immediate rotation minutes, cost me a little less money, and not come in here as if he's only here for 8 months and understand there's a process and we're going to be able to develop him and improve him. So that's essentially what I was talking about.
Fair enough. One player, you mentioned international players and kind of looking in those buckets, Jacob Furphy.
Yeah.
Last time we talked, you hadn't seen a lot of him. I think everyone has a better idea of the type of player he is, watching him in the FIBA under 19. He's looked great. Still a little bit of an enigma because there's not as much film on him, but there's more now. Talk to me about what your expectations for him are at UConn.
So skill level, feel for the game, off the charts. Credit to UConn and the evaluation, because to be clear, like, the level of due diligence we did on now let me preface it by saying this. Our international process has changed a little bit, like, because there's such an influx of international guys coming in. We're not including them in rankings anymore. someone like Furphy we did because he played in NBA Academy, so people on our staff had the chance to evaluate him in person. I was not one of those, but what I did was a lot of due diligence just in terms of talking to coaches who had coached him over the years. And I think UConn's evaluation of him has been proven to be right on. And yet it was a little bit contrarian at the time because there were other players in that NBA Academy program who were considered to be better at the time, better prospects, both, quite frankly. UConn valued Furphy more. And right now, based on what happened at the 19 Worlds, they look like they were right. And I'll also say that while the skill and the feel for the game were really evident in that setting, I do think there's untapped upside through conditioning. You know, you get them into a strength and conditioning program, and I think the thing that UConn has done in that program, I think what they do best is to get guys in shape. You think about, you know, why was Donovan Clingan so much better, so much quicker than anyone ever thought? Well, it's because the gains he made in his conditioning exceeded anyone's expectations. So I think that's an area that Furphy is really going to benefit from. And based on what we saw at 17s, now they've got a lot of backcourt depth here. They've got multiple, you know, ball handlers on this roster. You've got, you know, Jaden Ross and Jalen Stewart who can come back and play multiple positions. But it wouldn't shock me if Furphy, you know, ends up completely changing his body and then makes himself a fixture of this rotation. Just the way they want to play offensively. He can thrive in that style. And as I said, credit to their evaluation because I think a lot of people had underestimated Furphy and it seems like they hit the nail on the head with that one.
He joined us about a month and a half ago.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, great kid. A little bit of an audio issue being in Australia, but for the most part, it was a really good interview. Great kid, really great perspective, good head on his shoulders. So I think they're really excited about him. Last question. You mentioned this to me like the first time we met. You asked me like about my background, and I told you I was a former tennis pro. And you said that you had some background that you started off, you know, in that world. And this is a question I've never asked anybody. Which tennis player is Dan Hurley like the most?
Oh man, I'm not going here. Let's see. So you're looking for the McEnroe answer, but I'm not going to give it to you. You know what I'm going to?
I don't even want the McEnroe answer.
All right, here's what I got. Here's what I got for you. I'm going Joker. And the reason why is because I think that so I grew up an Agassi fan, right?
Me too.
But I thought Joker became, of this generation, he was my favorite because he was exceptionally self-aware. Exceptionally talented, but you could see the constant and he's talked openly about the constant battle to be the best version of himself and continue to grow with each passing stage. And in that, I think he became very relatable. And I think that's a lot of that narrative could also be applied to Coach Hurley. I think a lot of people, you know, they may not be able to resonate with being Bob Hurley's kid, but someone who is committed to being the best version of himself year in and year out and pushing the boundaries year in and year out and very open about you know, some of his idiosyncrasies. So yeah, I think there's some parallels there.
I'm going to give you one, and I think you'll know why. It's not McEnroe, but it's the same era. I grew up an Agassi fan too, but my dad was a huge Jimmy Connors fan.
Okay,
and so I see that parallel. Both lefties, both fiery, but also pretty self-aware. Like if you watch the 30 for 30 on him, very self-aware about, you know, that run that he made at the Open in I think 92 or 93, where he was 37 years old, made the semis. And just by career.
Wait, who was he playing? It was Aaron something, and like
Aaron
the quarters where he had like the 3 overheads and he got them all back, right?
Paul Horhouse, Horhouse, yeah. But the first match was Aaron Krickstein. That was that one that went 5 sets. Yep. Yeah, good. And he played Patrick McEnroe in the first round too. It was a lot of comebacks. So I think Dan could relate to that as a warrior. That's kind of the way I look at it, right? But the Joker comparison I think is a great one because I love Novak. I think he's great. But as a former tennis pro, I had to throw that in there and kind of hear your thoughts. So I appreciate.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Tell people where they obviously people know CBS Sports and they know 247. Tell people where they can find your work, and then we'll let you get on with your day.
Yeah, Adam Finkelstein, Finkelstein on X and Instagram and CBSSports.com and all those platforms, CBS Sports HQ and everything associated with CBS. So thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it. Always fun to chop it up.
That's Adam. I'm Mark. This has been another episode of the Hoops Cat Pod. Appreciate you. That was Adam Finkelstein of 247 Sports. Fantastic interview. Some great insight into kind of the mindset of Dan Hurley and his staff and what they were looking for from the Jacob Furphy evaluation to who they're potentially prioritizing now in the 26, 27 class and the depth and any potential concerns. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that and we'll see you next time.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby.